Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Joe Fitzgerald, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful startups and the challenges that they've faced, as well as the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we are lucky enough to have Mr. Karl Smith of Circles joining us. Karl will be sharing how this whole thing came to be, what he's building, as well as where he's going with the whole thing. So let's jump right in. Welcome to Founders Future, Karl. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, and thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast.
Excited to have you. Excited to chat about this because it's somewhat of a unique situation. But for the people who are not familiar with Circles or Karl Smith in general, give us the 30-second rundown. What is Circles? Who is it for? What do you solve in the world?
So, Circles is a response to the fact that social media is no longer social, or in fact, media. It seems to be purely a selling experience or a propaganda experience. And I don't think any of us really signed up for any of that. It's just what it's become.
Sure.
So, yeah, so Circles is secure, anonymous social media. And people go, well, wait a minute, how can I have social media that's anonymous? Well, the anonymous part is to ensure privacy of data, and so that targeted advertising can't happen. And in fact, advertising will not be allowed on the platform.
Hmm.
The key thing here is that we are many facets of people. We are the husband, we are the partner, we are the road racer, we are the person that likes certain genres of music. But actually, trying to manage all that complexity in one profile is really, really difficult. And what we're trying to do is build out a profile system that allows us to be multiple people on the same platform, but with those
Interesting.
profiles not connecting. They won't connect in the visible data, and they won't connect in the invisible data either. So there'll be no way to connect the whole person. And I often get asked, well, what about security? I'm going, don't worry, it'll be highly secure for the user, but it'll also be highly secure for the community of users because you still have to prove your identity because it's a paid for service, except we don't collate that identifiable data. That's a third party payment
Separate
gateway.
stuff. Yeah.
So we don't actually store any payment data apart from yes or no.
Interesting. And so the tried and true social media model, free to use for the end user, paid for by advertising on the platform. You guys flip that around.
Yeah.
Like, no advertising, end user is going to pay a fee. This is an interesting model. What sparked this in your brain, Karl? Take me to the moment where you had the epiphany, I'm going to share Circles with the world. What was going on for you and how did this come to be?
So I've always had multiple social media profiles, even on the same systems, because I do lots of different kinds of things. I'm not a singular person, and I don't think I'm unique in that. So I've always used these systems to gain access, to be focused, to have certain kinds of conversations with people. But I think the key epiphany has become how other social media platforms are just, the feeds are just completely full of garbage. It's so difficult to spot my friends in the feeds these days,
Hmm.
and to avoid being taken off on a path where I'm not interested in. And really, the effort involved in doing that makes using the system that I'm now using, the mainstream social media systems, not a good fun. And I recently deleted my X account. I had 40,000 followers, which is quite a reasonable amount of followers, and started again on Blue Sky because the actual system had become not a nice place to be. And so
That's a gentle way to put it.
Well, I think the thing is, if I have a choice, I'll go somewhere where it is a nice place to be. And I thought, the Facebook wants to become LinkedIn and LinkedIn wants to become Facebook, and I understand why, because it's about access and more people and more advertising. But the actual experience of both of them is now pretty garbage. And I don't enjoy either of them. So, and also, I don't like targeted communications. I'm there for my purposes, not for theirs.
Of course.
And that's no longer their remit. So I want to give people the kind of system that I would like to use.
Yeah. The obvious challenge to this is the awareness component, right? All social platforms that exist today have been battling the how do we get in front of the masses for 2 decades plus. How do you overcome that challenge? How do you get this in front of people that
So I don't.
use it?
So I mean, Facebook started amongst college students.
Right.
They used it, and then other people found out about it. I'm looking at the beginning as a word of mouth
Okay.
amongst tech people who are basically fed up with being fed loads of garbage in their feeds. I've engaged with about 100,000 people, about 50,000 say it's a good idea and they'd use it and they'd pay for it. So I've already got quite a lot of people interested in it. And I'm just going to build from there. It would be nice to have a billion users, but since I'm not going down the corporate finance route, it doesn't matter.
Hmm. This is fascinating, Carl. I'm scratching my brain to try to wrap my head around the whole thing. Talk to me about launch priorities. It sounds like this is still yet to go into the mass. What's kind
Yeah.
of big picture goals that you have upon immediate release of this thing?
So I think the main priority is supporting crowdfunding. How do I give people that are willing to support it financially something useful? So that is the how do you sign up for the first profile? How are you allocated second profile? So when you join, you'll get three profiles straight away.
Mhm.
You can get loads of others, but initially we just want three profiles. We have one that has a made up name that is generated through an application that I've already written. The second one, you can reuse that application or you can make up your own name. And the third one, you can use your real name if you want, or attributes of your real name. And the reason for that is that we want to cover across general sets of behaviors of being social, being accessible to family, being accessible to peer-to-peer business. And those are kind of the three key criteria.
Yeah. And so, the crux of this is it's funny the way that my brain is going here. It's kind of the anti-social media, but really the social
Yes.
media and not what true social media platforms have become known to be.
I
What
mean,
is the
maybe I'm an
long-term?
idealist, but I'd rather be an idealist that will have a go than one that actually will just subsume myself to
Yeah,
the
the man in
malaise
the arena,
of
right?
uh, and I did go to a friend who's quite wealthy and say, how would I get funding? And he said, well, if you go through any kind of corporate funding, you're going to have to forget at least 50% of what you just told me about what the platform does
Yeah, it's no
because you
longer
won't you won't be able to
calling the
generate
shots.
money quick enough for those that would invest.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, that's fair enough. So that's why I'm going crowdfunding.
What's the timeline in mind for all of this, Carl?
Well, I'd like to get the alpha up by sort of June next year. If I'm going to start the crowdfunding in February, the actual alpha would be need to be up by June, so that those people that given the funding actually have immediate access.
Yeah.
That's really important to me. There's been so many scams in technology over the last years that I want people. I've done other things, and people say, "Well, how do we invest?" And I'm saying you can't because there isn't anything yet.
Yeah,
And
this is an
I'm
idea.
not interested in making money. I'm interested in building stuff. Um, which sounds really odd. I've got money. I'll put it that way. I've made money out of being a consultant, and I'm quite a decent consultant. And I've designed huge banking systems, some of them in the US, some of them in Europe, some of them in Southeast Asia. They work. They're trading platforms. They work with corporate finance. I've worked on all of those kinds of systems. So I'm quite good at that. But to actually get something like this going, I'm happy to go slow and get it right.
Yeah, this is a new venture. This is a totally
Yeah.
different industry than what you're used to, besides just the general idea of
I have designed social media platforms before,
Okay.
I did one with a care home system that wanted to create an internal social media platform so that people could create local engagements around certain kinds of activities. So if you were living in a certain area and there was maybe two or three care homes and the people had different levels of mobility, they might want to go fishing. So out of 300 people, you might find four people who wanted to go fishing and they could create a fishing group
Hmm.
and they would go fishing irregularly. I just think that is the power of technology, is to break down those barriers of location and time. Um, but it's no longer used in social media, not in the way that it was originally.
What's the big picture vision for all of this, Carl? Where do you see this in 5 years?
So I think the big picture vision is the elimination of identity fraud.
Hmm.
That would be a great win because your identity is no longer linked to your transaction capability. There's no reason why the financial part of this couldn't become a normal way of working and buying things. You know, you shouldn't have to give your name, address, and date of birth, current location, and gender identity to buy a candy bar in a service station.
Funny how
And
things go in cycles, huh?
yet the companies involved want that. Well, why? I mean, I don't want to give that information out, so why should I have to? And if there's a big enough group of people that operating with an anonymous identity and have the capacity to buy things, I think businesses will say, "Well, we want their business." And I think that's what I would love to be able to move us to anonymous transactions.
Hmm. Zoom out on this whole thing and talk to me in a macro sense for a minute. The incumbents in the platforms, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the LinkedIns, whoever else plays in this space. Where do you see those going? Do they double down and continue doing more of what they're doing? Do they recognize, you know,
I
indicators
mean,
of market and
X,
pivot?
yeah. So microblogging with X is on a downward spiral. Blue Sky is on an upward spiral. Facebook is currently more involved in regime change than it is in social media.
2 billion people on there.
And LinkedIn wants to become Facebook. So I think people will carry on using them until they're fed up with them. But I mean, LinkedIn is dying a death at the moment with so many fake jobs on it. So it's the thing that it wasn't to start with is what it became when Microsoft bought it, which was a job platform. But most of those jobs aren't real, so people are just getting fed up.
This is a fascinating conversation. I feel like I could go in any number of directions, but we're running a bit shy on time here. I want to get your opinion just more to the direct heart of being an entrepreneur and what you see as necessary for success, at least 2024 and 2025. You've built businesses, you've consulted for businesses, you're now building circles. If you were to look back and say, Carl of 20 or 30 years ago, here's some advice, or if you were to speak to the listeners of this platform and say, this is what I see as imperative for building a new business, what would you share with those folks?
I think guts, because there's going to be always be. I always think of the Wright brothers and that cartoon of the people talking to them before the plane took off, and they're saying it will never fly, it will never fly, and then it's in the air, and someone's saying it will never land. And I just think there will always be naysayers, and if you don't try, you will never know. And I don't mind failure. See, so I was brought up in Europe, and in European and British philosophy, failure means an absolute you're garbage. In American philosophy, failure means you've had a go and you've learned something. And I that's why
Just
most of
one step
my
closer to the next
that's
success.
that's why most of my alignment is with America because American philosophy around business is the best in the world as far as I can tell because it's really focused on what did you learn and will you avoid doing it again?
Mm.
Whereas other cultures are about, you're ashamed to your parents and to your clan, or you
Yeah.
failed, how dare you? And
Yeah.
actually, I'm not interested in any of that. I just keep going. Be very, very pragmatic. I mean, I know people who have invested their entire wealth in ideas that someone else has already built, which is horrific. And someone came to me after spending $3.5 million on something which is everything they had, and they used up all their credit cards and everything. And it was something that a company called Medtronics had already built. And I said, cut your losses, stop working on it, go and get a job.
That's a hard one,
And
huh?
it wasn't what he wanted to hear. I had someone else come to me and say, we want to build eBay. We've got this amount of money. I said, well, with that amount of money, you can afford E. You can't afford the bay, because it's
It's
be
been done.
pragmatic about it. And I'm pragmatic. If it doesn't work, but I'll give it a few years, but I'll accept a loss, but I won't accept not trying.
Yep. Brilliant. Carl, we're up against the clock here. Circles is coming, hopefully. It's the latter half of 2025. Where can people learn more about it in the short term?
There is a website. It's a bit glib at the moment because it's bootstrap. So circles.mobi. Um, that needs to move on to new servers that are a bit more secure, but that's okay. And it will be on Kickstarter.
People of Founders Future, look for circles soon. That wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. Carl, thank you for sharing your journey, your insights, your wisdom with us today. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future via wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we are dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales through trained appointment setters and world-class marketing systems. Until then, keep climbing, and we'll see you on the next one.